Chief Justice John Marshall.
Chief Justice John Marshall was born on September 24, 1755 in Germantown, Virginia. John Marshall was the eldest of 15 children. His parents were Thomas Marshall and Mary Randolph Keith. Marshall's father was a land surveyor and made a tidy income. As a child, Marshall was homeschooled by his father. He spent 1 year at Campbell Academy, which was founded by Archibald Campbell. He attended William and Mary College, where he studied law. The college was very small because most professors and students served in the Revolutionary War at the time. When Marshall was 20 years old, he decided to join the army and fight for a new nation due to the George Washington's inspiration. Marshall was promoted as an officer for the Continental Army's 3rd Regiment of Virginia. Then, after the Battle of Germantown, Washington promoted him again to be his chief legal officer. After the war, Marshall began his own legal practice and officially became a lawyer. In 1782, Marshall joined the Virginia House of Delegates. Later on, in 1788, Marshall was appointed as a delegate to ratify the U.S. Constitution. He then later earned a spot in the House of Representatives in 1798. In 1800, President John Adams nominated John Marshall to be Secretary of State. He served a year as Secretary of State. Right after his term, he was appointed to be the 4th Chief Justice of the United States. He served from 1801 to 1835. Marbury v. Madison established judicial review to determine if an act by the President or Congress was constitutional. Cohens v. Virginia. This established that the Supreme Court could review a state's court decision involving any power which strengthened the judicial branch. Gibbons v. Ogden. Marshall ruled that monopoly in New York was unconstitutional, which established control of interstate commerce, strengthening the legislative branch. Dartmouth College case. Marshall ruled that it was unconstitutional for Dartmouth to change from private to public, strengthening federalism. McCulloch v. Maryland strengthened the judiciary branch because the federal government used implied powers to create the bank. Marshall was the longest-serving Chief Justice in the history of the U.S. Supreme Court. He went to school with future President James Monroe at Campbell Academy. He wrote a biography about his role model, George Washington. John Marshall passed away on July 6, 1835. He still served as a justice until the day of his death. Marshall was buried at the Schucco Cemetery in Richmond, Virginia, next to his wife, Mary Willis Ambler.
Supreme Court case Texas v. Johnson.
The parties involved was communist activist Gregory Lee Johnson and the state of Texas. The case happened in 1989. The case occurred at the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals in Austin, Texas. In 1984, Gregory Johnson, a communist activist, was at a Republican National Convention. Him and other radicals marched to Dallas City Hall and burned the American flag to protest Ronald Reagan's policies at the time. This went against a Texas statute that prevented the desecration of a venerated object, including the American flag. A Texas court tried Johnson for violating that statute, and he was found guilty and convicted by the Texas court. He was charged with a $2,000 fine and a 1-year prison sentence. The case went to the Supreme Court because Johnson appealed the guilty charge. He claimed that his actions were protected by the First Amendment right, and it was symbolic speech. He won the appeal, and the state of Texas was unhappy, so they decided to appeal that decision. The Supreme Court voted 5-4 in favor of Johnson. They claim the amendment protects against actions even if they are offensive. The opinion of society isn't enough to affect the decision, and his claims that his actions were symbolic speech were supported.
The issue with burning the flag still is controversial today, and Congress has tried 4 times to pass an amendment to prohibit flag burning, which passed the House but got shut down by the Senate.